Entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. Code Mayo is always at Underdog to get that going. But today we're talking the Week 2 DraftKings picks. We're going to go over ownership, build some core lineups, and some shells for games that maybe we don't even like, but maybe you like, to see what the best way is to structure your teams in GPP formats. John from 4for4.com is on there right now on the line. Tambo has been fired from this program. Or he's at a wedding, one of the two. You'll find out next week whether or not he's on the show. Replacing him this week, Erik from Spike Week. What's going on, my man?
I'm super pumped to be here. John doesn't even know this, Pat, but I've known John for many years now. I've known Tambo for many years, but I actually knew you first. My very first DraftKings live final in Toronto, got to meet and hang out with the legend Pat Mayo. We had good times. So a little bit of a full circle moment. Excited for Week 2 is my favorite slate of the year. So super pumped.
How drunk was I at that thing?
Well, I don't remember. So I had to be right there with you.
But John, I'm guessing that you guys have met at live finals over the years then, because I only got to go because I was working with DraftKings at the time.
Yeah, no, exactly. Erik and I have done shows together for years. We used to hang out every Sunday morning online doing a show. So I'm psyched to be doing a show with Erik again. We've hung out at live finals, met in person. But yeah, it's psyched to be doing a show again. So yeah, good times.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened in Week 1 to see if we were successful or unsuccessful. John, I ended up going with that core lineup that we built on the show with Flacco and Tillman, and I think that one had Njoku and not Judy in it. I just assumed I was dead after the first slate without kind of realizing that no one really scored any points in any of these games. So I went in, I was like, oh, I'm actually doing pretty well here. Not like, a big win or anything like that, but I was basically able to win like 5% of my money on the week. That was played 10 teams in the $10, the $250, the $150. The win in the $150 was enough to make me slightly positive for the week. So I don't feel like I made very good picks, but it turned out it was just difficult to make good picks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen this now the last few years with scoring and yards down a little bit, and it seems to be like particularly strong, or the offenses seem to be particularly behind the defenses earlier in the season, and that adds a little bit of variance because suddenly these meaningless receptions that you're getting 1 point per reception, you think, oh, it's not, I'm dead in the water, but actually that's 6 receptions for 30 yards is 9 points, and actually goes somewhat far if nobody's scoring touchdowns. So it adds a little bit of variance. It's something we should keep in mind going forward.
Erik, how was your Week 1?
It was okay. I would call it okay. Similar to you. Somehow after the early slate, I was like hanging in there. Something I really like to do at the beginning of the season, in particular Week 1, is kind of take some stuff that, like you talked about the Browns. The Browns were a big, core kind of flag plant for me, but I went to the rookies that like absolutely no one was playing Harold Fannin. Now people are interested in playing Harold Fannin. No one was playing Dylan Sampson. They were leaning into the veterans. And so that worked really well. Jamar Chase on the opposite side didn't work so well. There was some other stuff that wasn't so great. So hit or miss, but I think overall like exciting because you can see some of the stuff where like our opponents are really not willing to take like big risks on some certain unknowns. And that's going to be the same in Week 2 that we can use, I think, to our advantage, even if, like you said, our picks weren't perfect.
Yeah. How do you utilize, John, what happened in Week 1 to build your portfolio of teams and players and cores for Week number 2?
I think it's always just a good reminder that things can be very contest specific. We saw like Justin Fields, I think, was the top scoring quarterback last week, but in a lot of smaller field contests, like you didn't need Justin Fields. Michael Penix won a lot of those. Daniel Jones did very well. It was just, Justin Fields kind of came out of nowhere as rushing, like those super rushing dependent quarterbacks can put up those spike weeks where they're just destroying the scoring with their rushing ability. And that tends to be somewhat matchup independent, but it's just good to keep in mind that you want to tailor your lineups to the size of the contest that you're playing, and never like put anything completely out of the question, right? Like that was like we talked last week about how the lowest scoring game in 2024, the game with the lowest total, ended up being the highest scoring game, where the Saints outscored the entire total just with their own offense. And we saw the same thing or a similar thing in week 1 where the lowest total game going into it ended up having the quarterback that you wanted to be playing.
So everyone out there watching the live right now, smash the like. I actually just dumped the link into the chat. Please go share that around for me on X if you can. That would be glorious. And you got to be subbed to the channel in order to jump into the chat. We'd love to hear from you after the fact of the show. You smash the like, you sub to the channel. Give me your single favorite sleeper play, let's say below $5,000 on DraftKings this week that you're pretty good with just jamming into your lineups. Erik, do you have a quick response to your favorite like low price play this week?
Yeah, it's actually Troy Franklin from the Denver Broncos. We'll get into a nice deep cut, but he really, right, they traded Devon Vele. He really cemented himself as the wide receiver 2 there. I like the Broncos for an offensive bounce back. Their defense is really good, but super cheap Troy Franklin running the second most routes on the Broncos against a Colts team that I think is going to struggle a lot more this week than they did against the corpse of the Miami Dolphins.
You see, if they don't struggle more, then we need to pencil in Indianapolis as a very good team, I think.
100%. I don't believe that Daniel Jones all of a sudden turned into a good quarterback. And I do think that the Denver Broncos defense will travel, coming from somewhat West Coast to the center, I guess the Midwest. But that defense is arguably the best in the league. I mean, maybe the Packers last night are disproving that pretty quickly, but I think that defense is going to a pretty big rude awakening for old Daniel Jones compared to what he saw in week 1.
Well, I agree with Erik, John, and I think if you polled everyone, that 99% of people would agree with that. But does that become like decent leverage that, we get stuff wrong all the time? Maybe Daniel Jones and the Colts going back to them could be the move here, because I'm guessing no one's going to do that.
Yeah, so I was high on Daniel Jones going into week 1, and some of it was the matchup. We thought the Dolphins could be in disarray, and they did not disprove that. But some of it is just this concept that these highly drafted quarterbacks sometimes need to float around a little bit before they land in their like destination where they can succeed. We saw that, Sam Darnold, we've seen Baker Mayfield, like guys get drafted highly, appear to be busts, then go somewhere else. In like Baker's case, go a couple different places and then really find success. And actually that same thing was true of Justin Fields last week. Like he actually looked like a really good quarterback in addition to being a really good fantasy quarterback. So yeah, I actually think that like Daniel Jones is viable this week, despite a tougher matchup.
Well, let's talk about some of the injuries that are going to affect the choices this week and maybe open up some value. The biggest ones right now, you got basically everyone on San Francisco is out. Kittle's out. Jennings looks like he's going to be out. Obviously, Brock Purdy's not playing. Mac Jones is starting at quarterback. Erik, does that do anything for you for opening up value, or is it just like, hey, let's play Christian McCaffrey and move on?
Yeah, you can play Christian McCaffrey for sure, but I actually think this opens up one of my favorite wide receiver plays of the slate, and that's Ricky Pearsall. He led the wide receiver, the non-Christian McCaffreys in targets in week 1. And say whatever we want about Mac Jones. I'm not going to sit here and flag plant Mac Jones as an NFL talent, though he could be kind of the example like John was talking about that needed to bounce around and get into, a Kyle Shanahan situation rather than what he's been in up to this point in his career. But he's like what I would call he's like a kingmaker for these wide receivers. Brian Thomas Jr. last year in weeks 1 through 9 with Trevor Lawrence, who we assumed to be better than Mac Jones, had 35 for 595 and 5, right? Okay. It was an okay start. In weeks 10 through 18, so one fewer game with Mac Jones, 52 catches. So he had as many catches as he had targets with Mac Jones, 687 yards and 5 touchdowns. Go all the way back to his final year at Alabama, which got Mac Jones to be a first-round pick, right? If you recall, there was a fella named Devontae Smith on that team, who I know Travis Hunter won the Heisman as a wide receiver. He won the Heisman as only a wide receiver with 145 targets, 117 catches, 1,800 yards, and 24 touchdowns in 13 games with Mac Jones. I think Max knows where his bread is buttered, and it's just go to the best guys and don't try to get cute. That can be a flaw in his game, but I think it makes Pearsall just an absolute home run at 5,300 on DraftKings.
What do you make of that? Because with Mac Jones chucking him the ball, John, that, do you worry about Mac Jones at all? Because when we get to the optimal, when we start there, like he's in it.
Yeah, I worry a little bit, but that, these prices, in this economy, those are great prices. Like as a fantasy DraftKings option, I'm less worried, with Mac Jones being 4,000, with Ricky Pearsall being 5,300, and it's a good environment. They're indoors. That always helps a little bit. I think San Francisco's offense that we have to take a look at this week. They're still favored. They still have a implied point total, over 21.5. So yeah, I don't know. I think we got to go there. I think they're going to be popular, but they should be.
Dallas Goedert doesn't look like he's going to go, John. Does that interest you at all in Calcaterra, or is that just something that we try to do every year and it just doesn't work?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm probably not going to go there. I was actually literally just writing a sentence in an article about how I like Jalen Hurts. I like the quarterbacks this week. The top range of pricing at quarterback, which is not always true on DraftKings, and that for Jalen Hurts in particular, I don't know that you necessarily need a stacking partner. I'm trying to think of the last time you really needed like Dallas Goedert to take down a tournament. And I'm not sure I necessarily want to go piling into his backup.
What do you make of it, Erik?
I will say on your tight end point, if Calcaterra doesn't do it this week, I think that's the official nail in the coffin, because the Chiefs, I thought it was an intriguing spot for Dallas Goedert. They've been historically quite terrible against tight ends. Last year, they were 7th worst in all of the NFL. Despite only giving up, usually like tight end fantasy scoring can be really fluky because it's driven by touchdowns. They only gave up 5 touchdowns to tight ends last year, and they were still, near the bottom in fantasy points allowed to the position. Goddard did lead them in targets, but I'm pivoting more, just like John, to the Eagles passing game. I do like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith probably a little bit more, but I don't think you have to play them. I agree. The Chiefs are a pass funnel. They're going to stop the run. Steve Spagnuolo is going to bring pressure, which can create one-on-ones, right? For AJ Brown, we can actually get a deep shot that we didn't see. It's Jahan Dotson with the only deep shot of the game from the Eagles. I think week 2 is going to look very different for their passing game.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people are leaning towards you. Like, I like the Eagles to win that game. Therefore, I think that they're going to score points at some point. But I'm just looking at the early projected ownerships, John. This is all up at, you can get the optimizer, the ownership projections. One of my favorite tools up there is the Team Stack ownership projections, where it tells you the entire passing game, quarterback and 2 pass catchers, how much collectively is that going to be owned. But what I'm seeing right now, and again, it's still Friday, we got a lot of time to work this through. Barkley's coming in at like 7% ownership in GPPs.
Sorry, who is that coming in?
Saquon,
7%. Yeah, that's not high. It'll be interesting to see. I like I said, I don't mind the idea of like spending up at quarterback, and then there is going to be some competition at the running back position. So that seems low for Saquon, but there's an opportunity cost at running back this week you have to keep in mind as well.
Well, and Erik, to point out what John's talking about, again, we're seeing Christian McCaffrey at like 30+% at the moment, which means like sub 10% for Derrick Henry, for Saquon Barkley. Jonathan Taylor is another one that no one really likes this week. James Cook was coming into the week with this like hamstring problem that popped up on the injury report. He's off that now, so he's going to end up going against the Jets. In the hierarchy of running backs, near the very top on the main slate for Sunday, you're looking at McCaffrey, A-Chain, Chase Brown, and then you got some like Kyron, some Jahmyr Gibbs. But there are certain guys that are just seemingly not being used, I wouldn't say at all, but like 5 times less than the top guys.
I think it's very tricky in full point PPR for the likes of Saquon and Derrick Henry. Saquon did get a few more targets, and then Will Shipley did get banged up. So I think that does make him a little bit sneakier than like a normal Saquon Barkley game would be. He was a member, a key part of that passing game. We kind of don't think it's going to be the exact same in week 2. But again, I know it seems silly, like probably no Will Shipley this week, but that probably means an extended snap share. Shipley came in and was playing on that first drive and spelling Saquon. So if you do actually get an elevated passing role here on a team we like that's going to score a bunch of points, I think, 7% is probably a little bit too low, even though it's a little difficult for him to catch CMC just in full point PPR.
Well, explain to me, John, like how you can kind of navigate that. Like, what would you have to wait to play Saquon over CMC in this spot, knowing that CMC just has a much easier time of getting to the top of the fantasy points leaderboard on DraftKings because of full point PPR? But with Barkley, and I guess Henry would be the other one on that too, that that they have to score like 2 60-yard touchdowns.
Exactly. This is a dynamic I've been struggling with for years. I'm generally under the field on Saquon and Derrick Henry on main slates. So thankful that Derrick Henry was in the Sunday night game last week in week 1, because like he would have demolished me with 160 yards. Like it's the the perilous life we live, where these super efficient running backs that just can break these long runs like Saquon and Derrick Henry. We think of them as not catching passes, and that the field's going to go there more than they should, and I'll take the 7 receptions from Christian McCaffrey. It's like an extra touchdown on top of his yardage and his touchdowns. But when Saquon and Derrick Henry break those 60, 80-yard runs, it's not a good feeling.
Erik, I'm seeing Chuba Hubbard at $6,000. I really like Chuba Hubbard this week. I also like James Conner on the other side because I just think that anyone going against Carolina is someone you want to play. Even if he's getting like a 60-40 split with Trey Benson, I don't really care as long as he's in there near the goal line, because after watching Carolina last year and in week 1, they just can't stop anyone on the ground. And now you got a more mobile quarterback coming at you with Kyler Murray that, there's going to basically spontaneously combust on defense, and James Conner should have enough lanes to get through for some high upside multi-touchdown scoring, or at least that opportunity in this game. But that's not where I'm seeing the ownership go from $6,500 and down. Now, maybe people are just paying up. I see a lot of Kyron Williams. I see a lot of Alvin Kamara. And then you got no Brees Hall. I mean, Tony Pollard, I would have expected to be more popular, but maybe him and Hubbard at almost identical prices are splitting that up. But I'm seeing those guys not really being that highly owned, which I frankly thought was kind of shocking.
Those are probably my 2 favorite examples of what I would call week 2 brain of, not everybody can get a bunch of ownership, but those guys are the types of guys who we came into week 1, like with Tony Pollard, no Tyjae Spears, expecting a monster workload, right? And he ultimately got it. It just didn't go very well. They played the Broncos. He didn't catch a bunch of passes. It didn't go perfectly. But our expectations shouldn't really change for Tony Pollard, in my opinion, in week 2. But nobody wants to play him now, even though the matchup's better and they're at home. And there's a lot of reasons. The price is great, right? So he's been historically good in full point PPR. Everything is kind of every box is getting checked with Tony Pollard. On Brees Hall, Brees is like the exact opposite. We came in really worried about Brees Hall. All the talk all summer was they're going to play all their running backs. Braylon Allen is going to steal work. Justin Fields, is going to steal goal line work and doesn't check down and all those different things. And Brees was essentially the workhorse, and he was outstanding. What's interesting about the Jets is 71% of their plays were either a Fields or a Brees run or a Garrett Wilson or a Brees target. It's basically the whole offense was those 3 guys. And so I'm really interested in kind of when our opponents aren't chasing what happened in week 1, they're not buying it. That's when it's fun to buy in to that, right? Like a Brees Hall. And when our opponents are running away from the thing that they thought was true in week 1 because of a bad game or a down game, then I want to pile into those guys. I think those guys are probably the best 2 running back examples of that.
It's funny, John, because I really like Hubbard this week. I still hate Tony Pollard. I just don't think he's good.
I don't know. I actually think the Tennessee offense is in a much better spot, at least this week, than in week 1. The Denver defense, especially going into Denver, especially in the first game of a quarterback's career, is just an extremely difficult spot. So I think and they handled themselves decently. They lost the game, but they didn't get shut out. They put up 12 points. They had successful drives. I think that the Tennessee offense, should look much better this week against the Rams. And so that, there's a bunch of places we can go there. But, Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Cam Ward, I think could all be a little bit better and more useful this week than last week.
John, I think that the Tennessee defense or Chig would be the 2 places I would go, because I think the Rams defense is still pretty good as well. Obviously, maybe not at the level of the Broncos, but I just see the inefficiency with Tony Pollard that even when he's had this workhorse role in the past, he just doesn't score that many fantasy points ever.
Well, he had some good games in Dallas.
But we're not in Dallas. We're not in Dallas anymore.
Not in Dallas, that's true. I don't know. Yeah, I'm a much bigger Tony Pollard fan. It sounds like than you are. I think he's a decent play. He's at only 5,900. I think the entire offense should look a little bit better this week. He does catch some passes, so. And then he has the workload too. I think you just can't underestimate that workload. It means a lot when a running back is the main guy. You have those opportunities end up being useful.
I would make the exact same argument with Hubbard that, Daddle didn't do anything in that game until it was completely out of reach. Then he got some run. Hubbard even got you the garbage time receiving touchdown that he didn't even need to be in the game for, yet they kept him on the field. He ended up with over 20 touches in the game. I like that back and forth a little bit more. And I just, it feels to me, and maybe I'm just reading that game completely wrong, that Rams Titans, it's just going to be like a sloppy game where there's not I like the 5.5 with Tennessee. I like the Tennessee defense. I just don't see a ton of points being scored. I actually walked away with the Denver game being impressed by Tennessee's defense. Maybe it's Bo Nix sucks, and I'm not willing to admit that. And I want to put the success on the Tennessee defense instead of the blame so much on Bo Nix for how they looked in that first game. I was going to offer you a hair versus hair bet on Hubbard versus Pollard, but I think that's a minus EV bet for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm a much bigger Tony Pollard fan. I think the Tennessee offense, especially with Cam Ward having a game under his belt now, I think that says a lot. So we'll see how things go, this week against the Rams.
Erik, where would you land on this?
I think I'm on John's side. I think I'm on Tony Pollard. Can I throw out if we want to make this a 3-horse race? Can I throw out a guy in a somewhat similar price range? I'll take Travis Etienne to you guys, Tony Pollard and Chuba Hubbard in a similar price range. I like that spot better. I think the workload projects very similarly amongst all three guys, though I would probably give Pollard a little bit more, but it's pretty close. Obviously, No Tank Bigsby is a big deal. I think the two rookies are going to get work, but I just want to if we're going to put our chips on the table, I want to put mine on behind Travis Etienne in that group.
All right, well, let me create a poll here. Let me check it out. Who scores more DK points? This is another way that you can help out the show after the show is done. And even in the chat right now, you can vote in the poll after the fact. You let me know in the comment section if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or watching on Spotify. Video's up there now too, video or audio. Look at that. Sub up there as well. In the comment section up there, you let me know who you would rather play. Would you rather play? Who scores more DK points this week? Hubbard, Pollard, or you said ETN?
Yep.
All right. ETN question mark. Let's start the poll. Throw that out there. We'll check back in with you good live viewers. Smash like we're here and vote in that poll. When we come back from this break, we're going to look at the optimal. We're going to rejig it. Then we're going to go game by game to build out some shells. So please stay tuned. For over a century, Johnnie Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereux Golf, Johnnie Walker introduces the Johnnie Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnniewalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/PatMayo and get on your way to being your best self. Sometimes we turn to some funny places for support, but not everyone's a therapist. Not everyone is the one. Find your right match with BetterHelp. What you need to do is actually talk to a quality therapist, and BetterHelp therapists work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the United States. It's also completely online. You can pause your subscription whenever you need to and switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/PatMayo. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PatMayo. If you want to use the optimizer, get those ownership projections. 4for4.com/Mayo get you 25% off all packages there. I prefer the Sharp Stack one because it gets you everything. Fantasy, DFS, League Sync, and all of the bets, props, and Discord. You get a free week trial over there as well at 4for4.com/Mayo. Get all John's work at 4for4.com too. Additionally, I will have my free cheat sheet from my newsletter coming out on the weekend on Saturday. I'll have an accompanying show with that too. Hit the description or go to Mayo Media on Substack to join if you haven't already. Bring it up, Jared. Bring up the optimal from what I did already here and projected it out. Guys, here's what we're working with. Mac Jones at quarterback for $4,000. Devin Achane and CMC at running back, $6,900 and $7,500 respectively. Jamar Chase, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Cedric Tillman as the wide receivers. Hunter Henry as the tight end. Chuba Hubbard, there we go. The optimizer agrees with me at $6,000 in the flex spot. And then Steelers D at $3,100. Somehow this leaves $300 on the table. So, yeah, I guess that's what we're up to. I'm guessing it probably had Dallas Goedert in it at $4,300, and it just had to bump it to whoever the next best projected player was. John, what do you make of this lineup on first assessment?
So the first thing that sticks out to me is Mac Jones. And, I know I said I think he's a competent fantasy quarterback, but there is a thing with pricing this week. We saw the price drop on all of the top quarterbacks. I was just writing, I think Lamar Jackson has not been $7,000 on DraftKings since 2020. Josh Allen put up 41 DraftKings points and saw his price drop to drop $100. I'm much less inclined to use the cheap, primarily passing oriented quarterbacks this week with this pricing, especially, Christian McCaffrey is really cheap. I think he's going to project as the best running back. I would actually orient a lot of my lineups this week, whether it's single entry, multi-entry, 150 lineups, whatever you want to do. I would orient a lot more of them towards the expensive quarterbacks. And, still, especially in the 150 set, right? The massive large field contests. You play some Mac Jones. He's only 4,000. You get some good, optimal-ish lineup constructions. But I would be the first thing I would do to this lineup is maybe take out Mac Jones and put in Lamar Jackson and try to find savings somewhere else.
I'm trying to think, Erik, is I go through it that I'm thinking about playing the 254 max, the 153 max, the $100 single entry. I just can't see myself tying myself to Mac Jones in any of those, knowing Justin Fields is what, $5,700? Yeah, I lose $1,700 from somewhere, but I'll downgrade the Steelers defense and Jamar Chase to someone else. It's not that big of a deal, I feel like.
Fields was the exact guy that I was going to bring up as well. That for not that, if you don't want to go up to Lamar Jackson, who I like Lamar, I like Allen, I like Hurts, I like the expensive guys just like John does. But even if you want to move up just a little bit, it's $1,200 to Drake May, who I know was not great. I know we're not excited about the Patriots, but Daniel Jones just put up that monster game against this Dolphins team. They're the Walking Dead Dolphins, and so you can move up a little bit and get lower ownership with Drake May. You can get lower ownership and not that much more, right? Like you said, the defense, downgrade your defense a little bit, downgrade your tight end a little bit. There's ways to save without really giving up much, and so I do like Mac Jones, probably in certain formats. But as John said, if I'm really trying to win, the tournaments that you're mentioning, I think I want to gravitate away from what's probably going to be a really popular guy, because they just always are at 4,000. And of course, he's on the 49ers against the Saints. He just checks a lot of boxes.
So what I've already done to this lineup, John, is we bring it up and you can kind of take a look of how you can assess it. I've switched out Mac Jones for Drake May, and I've taken Marvin Harrison Jr. down to Kayshon Boutte, the Boutte man. So now I got a triple Patriot stack with an A-chain bring back. I already like this lineup more before we do anything else to it.
Yeah, exactly. We suddenly added a bunch of stacking partners right there, and we're taking advantage potentially of a Miami defense that is just absolutely falling apart. I said all this stuff about how I think Daniel Jones is really poised for a comeback. Well, he could have just been looking good against the Miami defense. And also, I still like Devin Achane. Even, I like him if the Dolphins look much better this week, right? If the entire offense looks much better, that's good for the primary running back. If the offense is not as good, it looks, similar to how it looked in week one. Well, that's a lot of receptions right there when they're trying to play catch up. So that works out as well. So yeah, this lineup suddenly looks much better with Drake May in for Mac Jones.
Well, let's try to figure it out a little bit more, Erik, because I'm going to channel Tambo, who actually is not fired. He will be back next week. He's emceeing a wedding, so we had to go early. That don't play Jamar Chase as a one-off. If you're going to play Jamar Chase, always just stack him with Burrow, because if Chase absolutely breaks the slate, that means that Burrow has to come along with him. I always kind of try to remind myself of these very high-priced receivers that if they're going to go mental, you kind of want to stack them up to go along with it. So can we lose Chase from this and open up more of what we're doing here?
I tend to think so. I think Jamar Chase is one of those very unique superstar wide receivers. I would treat him and Puka Nacua very differently, and him and CeeDee Lamb very differently. And that, the other big thing for him is that the Bengals often get into these shootouts. When he's going crazy, their defense is not good enough to hold up to either they're chasing, right? They're chasing points. They're down. Their defense gives up 28 in the first half. So Burrow's throwing to him like crazy, or the opposite. He hits a couple big plays as Jamar Chase tends to do. Now the other team is chasing points and you can score on this Bengals defense, as we saw a pretty bad Browns team still be able to move the football. I think that they're a perfect like stacking partner and game stacking type correlation, whereas some of these other superstars, right, Puka, I know JSN is not a superstar, but right, those guys that are just kind of volume hogs in their offense, the quarterback is not so important in that.
Well, let's try to talk through some cheap defense if we want to alleviate some salary here. And if anyone is going through what they're doing this week and they're stuck for $100, $400, they really want to upgrade to $700, but you have one of the quote unquote good defenses in there. Erik, is there anyone at the bottom that you're looking at? Because I mentioned it already. I like the Titans at $2,400.
I think the Titans are probably my favorite. I agree with you wholeheartedly. One of my takeaways from that game was not just that the Broncos defense is awesome. It was not just that Tony Pollard sucks. It was that the Titans are probably pretty competent on defense. Bo Nix played like truly horribly, but I think part of that was because of the Titans defense. The Rams are not like a team I love to pick on, but Matthew Stafford is a pocket passer with a bad back. Two of their starting interior offensive linemen sprained their ankles in week 1, and they weren't exactly super successful against the Texans. I think they jump off the screen to me for sure as the super cheap defense. I would also add my most successful teams last week were, the Jaguars game was very popular. People were playing like Tedero McMillan and what have you on the Panthers side. If you want to play the Saints, I know they stink, but if Mac Jones really does stink and the 49ers are struggling to score, I think that makes some like super, milli maker tournament sense.
What do you make of it, John?
Yeah, so I think the Titans are my favorite cheap defense. Like I can't really say I like one much better. I'd consider maybe Carolina just for the savings, and then we can pair that with stack that with our running back in Chuba Hubbard.
We could do that. Is there anyone else that does jump out from you down here? I know that a lot of people like the Giants going into the year because they were going to get all this pressure, and then it never really materialized week 1 against Jaden Daniels. But maybe that's because you can't let Jaden Daniels get to the outside, unless you're Green Bay, whose speed in the front seven just allows you to trap Jaden Daniels in the pocket. The Giants were not as successful doing so that maybe against Dallas, who, frankly, Erik, got a pretty good draw as soon as Jalen Carter ended up going out of the game, that maybe it would be a time to go back to the Giants defense. I don't love it, but I can make that case. The other one, I guess, would be the Patriots at $2,800. That in this lineup, it doesn't particularly work, but they generated a ton of pressure against Geno Smith. And if they can do that against Tua, that sounds like a lot of fantasy points.
Totally. I think that the Cowboys are going to throw a lot every single week. And I'm not like completely buying what we saw in week 1 from them. And I'm not completely buying, like you said, I think the Giants pass rush is one of the best in the NFL. I think we can count on that. And so that's if you have a great pass rush and the opponent's throwing the ball a lot, that's going to lead to some potential fantasy points. And then I truly believe in this Dolphins thing. I believed it over the summer, so maybe I'm just anchored to the results of week 1. But I think they're an absolute disaster. It's just a matter of weeks before Mike McDaniel is gone. And as bad as the Patriots were against the pass, I haven't looked and seen, but Christian Gonzalez, their best defensive back, missed that game. If he's back, that should give him a big. He's not okay.
He's not.
Well, so throw that one out the window. But I still think that better days are ahead for the Patriots defense, and it probably starts here in this week against the Dolphins.
Yeah, I both my priors coming into the year, John, is I thought the Patriots were going to be terrible. I didn't quite understand why Drake Bortles was getting so much love as a guy who's actually going to win games. As a fantasy performer, love him. As a real life quarterback, I just haven't seen it as of yet. And I thought that people were a bit too down on the Dolphins. Now, I really haven't changed what I think about the Patriots, but this Dolphins thing just would worry me to no end. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. My biggest bet this week is Patriots plus 1.5 in Miami. And I think a lot of that could go with the defense. So you mentioned the savings that you would have with the Panthers if you need to go down there. We like the Titans at $2,400 as our favorite. Would the Patriots be next for you? Is there anyone else below $3,000 as a cheaper defense that you can see yourself getting to a lot of? Because it just makes sense in the context.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are definitely viable. I think Christian Gonzalez would help. I think he makes a big difference. But yeah, I agree. This Miami team could be falling apart. I had kind of heard rumblings about this over the summer, and I didn't really pay attention. 2 years ago, Miami looked so good. They had a down year last year. They're poised for a comeback. I no longer think they're poised for a comeback. Like that week one performance just didn't look good, and it the body language of the players does not look good. I'm going to wait for them to turn this around before I start investing heavily in Dolphins, other than Devon Chen.
Well, I just downgraded to Titans, John, in this lineup that we're looking at. So we do have $1,100 remaining. Let's take Chase out and try to build it up another way here. We can either upgrade. Maybe we don't need to triple stack Drake May because we do want him rushing, and maybe we just stick Boutte with him. So instead of Henry, there's no, obviously, Kittle on the slate because he's hurt. There's obviously no Brock Bowers. He might not even play this week, but he's playing on Monday Night Football. If we just go up to McBride in this spot, then we have McBride and Hubbard going head-to-head with each other. And we still have $7,200 for a receiver if we want to with Tillman and Boutte. The answer to my question of who my favorite play under $5,000 is still Cedric Tillman in this spot. But where do you think that you would go here with $7,200 remaining? We can still move everything around if we want to. We don't have to play Tillman, but I do see Neighbors is $7,100. Amon-Ra, Brian Thomas. Is there any preference that you would have here, or would you try a different roster construction from what you see?
So I don't know if I would have taken Alex Henry from this lineup, just because he is a natural stacking partner for Drake May, and yeah, I mean that gives us a lot of salary. I'll say that I really like CeeDee Lamb this week, at least going in. I think that the matchup against Philadelphia in week one is a pretty tough one. The matchup against the Giants maybe not as difficult. And that we've been waiting for CeeDee Lamb to get Dak Prescott back, and he got him back, and everybody's watching the game, and everybody watched CeeDee Lamb drop a couple passes, but those drops are probably not going to happen every week. And so he's in a much better situation this week. So I like the idea of maybe we put CeeDee Lamb in that lineup instead of Chase, and then we can upgrade wherever else we see fit.
Yeah, the move would be, I suppose, Erik, would be to take that Kayshon Boutte spot and try to get to Marvin Harrison. We just don't have quite enough money in order to do it. Although we could, actually, I threw in Jamar Chase. Maybe we take out Jamar Chase, put in CeeDee Lamb like I was trying to, then maybe it does free up enough money. Actually, it does free up enough money. So we can take out Boutte. We can put on Harrison with $100 left over. So we do have Harrison with Chuba Hubbard in that game. We have the triple stack for the Patriots with Achane coming back the other side. We have independent McCaffrey. Tillman is kind of a cheap flyer and a cheap defense. What would this lineup look like to you? Is this something that you would want to go with, or would you tweak it a different way, completely blow it up? What are you looking at?
No, I'm pretty comfortable with this, at least stylistically, structurally, how we're putting together this team. I mentioned I'm a little bit lighter on Chuba than you, and I'm probably a little bit lighter on Marvin Harrison Jr. than everyone is this week. So that's something.
I don't like Marvin Harrison either, John. I would prefer to work James Conner into this. I just don't know how I do that.
Yeah, actually, the thing that sticks out to me is that if we just drop down $100 from Chuba Hubbard to Tony Pollard, we're pairing our defense with a running back, but we've already gone through that discussion.
All right, so I'm going to put this one in. We'll move on to our next lineup and try to figure out what we want to do. Erik, you're the guest of the week. You can pick the game stack that you want to start with that we can build out. Let's see it.
Mine is the John's aforementioned Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb with Malik Neighbors on the other side.
So you don't want to go triple. You just want to go. I mean, it's a pretty expensive stack to start things off with Lamb and Neighbors getting through it. But is there another either Giant or Cowboy that you would want to throw into this, or no?
It would be George Pickens and just full, go all in on this new passing game for the Cowboys. But I like starting with CeeDee, kind of seeing where we go from there, because like you said, it is quite a bit of salary.
All right. If we start with that shell of a squad, John, where do you think that we have to go from here? Because I doubt it's not that Dak Prescott's going to be unpopular, but he's not going to be overtly popular at the same time either. I think if you start this way, you're probably unique enough to get going.
I agree. I would actually consider Jake Ferguson at 3,800. Just the opportunity cost at tight end might not be as high this week. And so at only 3,800, he's been a favored kind of target for Dak Prescott. We've seen him put up multiple touchdown games, I believe in the playoffs even. And yeah, with no Kittle, no Brock Bowers, like this, this week we may not have a lot of opportunity cost to tight end.
Additionally, Erik, with the Dallas game, I think that if people are picking and choosing pieces because Lamb is so expensive, Neighbors is so expensive, and I know that people will want to get to Jamar Chase with Burrow at some point, that it'll take these guys, they'll end up together in fewer lineups than I think that people think. And if people are going to go to Dallas, I'm guessing they're going to try to save as much money as possible and probably either take Ferguson or take Javonte Williams, who, yeah, he scored 2 touchdowns. I thought he kind of looked like crap, though.
He was unimpressive. I think he was fine, right? It's one of those compares a little bit to your Tony Pollard take, that if Tony Pollard really isn't very good, that's kind of what Javonte Williams is, getting a lot of work, but not really doing anything special from a talent perspective. I totally agree. I actually would prefer Tyrone Tracy as like a total 1 in 150 on the opposite side, where the Giants are bad, but he is commanding kind of the lead in that backfield. If this game goes the opposite of how we expect, if Dallas is not as good as we thought, like heading into week 1, we thought the defense would be bad. If that's the case, I think the Giants can have some real success here. And it's kind of just Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Tyrone Tracy as the entire offense for them.
So let's stick with this. I like this idea of Prescott, Lamb, Ferguson with a Neighbors bring back. That leaves us around $5,000 per player. Erik, where would you want to go to next? Do we throw in, let's say, like a cheap defense just to see what we got remaining, or do we want to fill out the core of, hey, because we have this lineup that isn't necessarily going to be like huge in terms of total ownership, maybe we can go with some of the chalkier pieces. If everyone is playing, everyone's going to be playing Jamar Chase and probably Chase Brown anyway, but Chase Brown makes a ton of sense here. Do we just jam McCaffrey in every chance we get?
I'd probably jam McCaffrey on this particular team, and then kind of see. I don't think that it's very difficult to fit even like this many expensive pieces on the week. And even without Mac Jones, which goes to our point about Mac Jones earlier and not being super necessary, I think we'll be just fine being able to fit this. You see 4,500 left. We haven't even plugged in a cheap defense. I think we'll be all right with CMC.
Where would you want to go here, John, next? Would you want to go cheap defense? Do you like Cedric Tillman? Does Cedric Tillman make the most sense as the cheapest wide receiver that you'd probably go to?
I think Tillman's fine.
Tillman's
I would
great.
Maybe save him.
Tillman is great. Let's not have Tillman slander. He's my guy, and he's great.
He's got to compete with Harold Fanning now. So
super
see how the targets go.
So where do you want to go here? Do you want to take the cheap defense, or is there another running back you think pairs well with this? Because this was in my newsletter this week. You can get those tidbits completely for free. It's been almost 1,100 days since Alvin Kamara had a 25-yard run.
Actually, I would maybe let's try putting a cheap defense in there, and maybe go with like the Saints over the Titans with some, kind of building like an anti-Mac Jones lineup.
Well, we do have McCaffrey in here, so should we go with the Saints? What about the Bears? Maybe they get a bit healthier on defense, and we kind of double down that the Lions' offense is secretly bad and is not just magically going to rebound this week.
We can go with the Bears. We can always adjust later. There's a pretty good number of defenses that I like in this price range, like the $2,500 price range. I think the Bears are fine. I don't know if I love them going into Detroit, but the Lions didn't look spectacular in week 1.
So that gets us back up to $5,100, John, for a running back, wide receiver, and flex spot. So we probably, if we want to get another good running back, or potentially like 2 of that tier, maybe that was always the Tambo answer to everything. Is it Pollard? Is it Hubbard? Or just play them both kind of thing and see how that works out and see what you're left with? What do you think is the more logical conclusion here to go to? Because beyond ETN, who Erik liked, after that, when you start going down at running back at that price point, there's not a whole lot of, one of these guys, 2 of these guys is going to absolutely pop, but I could not tell you who it's going to be.
Yeah, you're avoiding Tyrone Tracy. They would pair well in this game, and is actually, he's cheaper than the Hubbard, Pollard, ETN pairing. I like the idea of trying to get a lot of Brees Hall this week. I think Brees Hall and CeeDee Lamb actually are guys that stick out to me as not projecting well, but some of that projection could be based off of misinformation, right? Like the Jets offense could be much different with Justin Fields and maybe much better than we were expecting. So, but I think some of these projections are still based off of things like last season, same thing with CeeDee Lamb, where maybe we've got some some of the time without Dak Prescott creeping into the projections and creeping into our mindset a little bit. So yeah, I think we could like kind of spend up just a little bit more on Brees Hall, and he's going to be low owned, and then we still have a decent amount left over for our flex position.
So I threw in Brees Hall here, Eric, to go with McCaffrey. I also threw in Shakir at 55. Issue is that now leaves us with $3,700, which is not great.
No, it is not great. I think my guy Troy Franklin fits into that spot. I also don't think you have to play Shakir on the opposite side. Yeah, exactly. There's 3,700. So that's certainly a wild tournament play. I will say I don't hate the Shakir idea. I like him the best of the Bills receivers, just with how the Jets defense is constructed. And after watching the type of player that killed the Steelers last week, or killed the Jets last week from the Steelers, it was like Calvin Austin leaking out from the slot to the outside, DK Metcalf over the middle. Like that's where Shakir is going to run the primary amount of his routes, is over the middle of the field, which is where I think that the Jets are by far the most susceptible. I totally agree. And I think Keon Coleman, like you said, being on the boundary against a Sauce Gardner is a tough spot for him. So a good spot for Shakir.
So we could do Troy Franklin. Then we have $5,500 left. We can almost get. So if we throw in your boy Troy Franklin and then we go to the flex, we can get to ETN because we could save the $200 and use, I don't know, Browns D or Panthers D. Panthers D, like John had suggested earlier. We can do that. Or we can try to finagle it a little bit more where we don't need ETN in there. The only other running back I was thinking about, and I don't know if this ends up working yet, but what's Devonta Smith? Devonta Smith is $5,600. In the flex, you could go and you try to pick that game. And maybe that's getting too fancy at some point. Well, now I have way too much money in here. I don't know what the hell I did. But Kareem Hunt is $4,500. If you think that the Eagles jump out, John, I think you're just going to see a ton of Kareem Hunt in this game over Pacheco.
I was going to go with a different chief, but it's one where it's pretty news dependent. But Xavier Worthy practiced yesterday, so that's something to keep in mind. Keep an eye on, because he's that exact $5,700 price point. So like if we have 5,700 in a flex, like before I went to ETN, I'm definitely checking the practice reports for today and the actives list, right, to see if Xavier Worthy is able to give it a go this week, which is not something we were expecting just a few days ago.
Well, let's see if we can try to fit in Tillman here. We put in Tillman at $4,300. It gets back up to $5,000. This is becoming more difficult than I thought. Would you guys consider punting off McCaffrey in this spot to get a better balance at running back, even if it's Brees Hall? Because we're not playing Jamar Chase here. What if you brought Christian McCaffrey down to Chase Brown? I think it helps out this lineup a little bit more from top to bottom. Or would you be comfortable trying to roll something out like this?
I think I'd be okay with what we've got, but I will say, there is the possibility of just complete systemic collapse for San Francisco that people are not going to be thinking about, and generally, I do think that Christian McCaffrey's in a really good spot. He's probably going to be my highest owned running back this week, but there is that possibility that if Mac Jones is just terrible, going into the to New Orleans is not a it's an indoor environment, but it's not necessarily the best environment. He's still on the road. So, Christian McCaffrey could pile up a bunch of receptions or not, or the entire offense could just look terrible. So I think it's a good call that, we're not using Jamar Chase. Chase could be popular. So if we're not using Jamar Chase, dropping down to Chase Brown is some leverage off that.
What would you try to do here, Eric, to, finesse this lineup to make it what you would want?
I really like the Chase Brown call. I think that would allow you, if you wanted to. You don't have to do this, of course, but if you wanted to move to something like the Saints and do the anti-Mac Jones, anti-49ers sentiment on this team, you could do that at defense to get a little bit more off the beaten path. But something like this is exactly what I would do.
So instead of McCaffrey, so it's McCaffrey and an empty spot, and that empty spot would have to be $5,000 or less. Then you're sucked into Stefan Diggs, Cooper Kupp, a bunch of washed losers. Then you're in Kelsey, another one, Ridley, Roma Dunze, who I don't mind. You're into that level of player, or the 2v2 with that would be Chase Brown and ETN in that spot.
I will say Calvin Ridley is in that at 4,900, that he's going to be popular. But if we don't like Tony Pollard, but we do like the Titans, somebody's got to do something, and it's probably going to be Calvin Ridley.
Or the defense.
That's true.
Just all defense. They score 38 points on defense, and we will be good with this lineup, I think. John,
slander against the Titans offense.
I mean, let's not pretend like that. I mean, even the points that they scored last week were a product of their defense or special teams.
It'd be terrible if Tony Pollard had to run in 2 short yardage touchdowns because the defense turns them over. Yeah.
Now, we don't have enough money for Tony Pollard in that lineup anyway. We only have enough money for ETN, so we'll stop there with it. So that's the first game that we ended up going to. Do you want to do Cincinnati and Jacksonville, John?
Sure. I think that's one of the top environments. I was going to go Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, but I think right beneath that is Joe Burrow. So yeah, I think we can start with Cincinnati.
So how do we do it, John? So give me the sample shell here. It's Burrow, Chase, and what?
So yeah, let's see. I think you definitely start with Burrow and Chase. I might try putting Brian Thomas in there. Because it's Cincinnati. The first thing I'm thinking about is who to run it back with. I think Thomas probably is not going to be as popular as he should be this week, given that we don't think the Bengals defense is very good.
Where would you go from here, Erik? Would you add another Bengal and another Jag into a 5-player stack? Because you could get Brenton Strange in at tight end to save yourself some money if you wanted to. You could take out Brian Thomas and use ETN if you wanted to. If you did ETN and Strange, you could probably have enough money to add Chase Higgins at that point, or not Chase Higgins, T. Higgins at that point, if that's the way that you wanted to go.
I really like Brenton Strange just overall on the week, but in these specific teams, if this game is going to shoot out, the Bengals are disastrously bad against tight ends. Even last week, we saw multiple tight ends for the Cleveland Browns have good games. So if the target or if the volume from a passing game perspective is going up because this game is shooting out, I think Brenton Strange is way too cheap and he fits this particular game stack really well.
So Erik, do you like Thomas and Strange together, or do you like Strange better with ETN because it saves you some money?
I think both are acceptable, but I do like the Brian Thomas can be one of those guys, like he's their Jamar Chase that can totally speed this game up, right? Catch a 70-yard touchdown. ETN had I say that, and ETN had a 70-yard run last week, but generally speaking, I think Brian Thomas is the guy that makes the game stack go a little bit more.
Where would you go from here, John? Would you add another Bengal to this and make it a 3-2 stack?
Yeah, I think you can, especially if we've got 2 Jacksonville receivers here, so we probably want something from Cincinnati because we're not playing Trevor Lawrence. I think T. Higgins does a lot in this lineup. I mean, this is putting T. Higgins in here really calls for this game to shoot out, but it's the highest total of the week. I mean, that's this is why we game stack. And I see a pretty good lineup developing here. I'd put Christian McCaffrey in next, I think. That puts us in a familiar price range, I think, for the defense.
So yeah, we'll just drop back down to tight. So McCaffrey and Titans, Erik. That leaves us with a flex and a running back. Here's the problem: I don't know what running back we can play here. I guess we have to play your boy Tracy.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a Tracy, or this would be where it could make sense to do ETN over Brian Thomas Jr. and save a little bit off of BTJ. You're still kind of getting savings at the running back position too, right? But it's still hitting all of John's points about this game stack developing, but it does alleviate some of those concerns. We don't have to go to a punt wide receiver, and we do fill that running back spot.
We do, and John, it becomes easier to use ETN in that running back spot because, like I just said, unless you're using Tracy or Kareem Hunt, there's just not a lot of what we would consider to be reliable options at running back because we would have to fill that spot now, and now we don't have to. We can take 2 receivers if we want to.
Yeah, I'd say that we should not overlook Harold Fannin at 3,100. Especially in a lineup that's not using our favorite receiver Cedric Tillman. If it is Fannin getting the receptions in this game against Baltimore, he's only 3,100. I know the double tight end build is not always popular, but at 3,100, I think that's the range where you want to do it, right? Like we could just be betting against Trey McBride in this lineup by saying you want to be spending on 2 cheap tight ends. And that gives us a little bit more money to play with.
Well, if we do that, that means we could potentially put Brian Thomas back into this lineup then, and then we'd have 5,900 for Tony Pollard.
How'd that happen?
So this would be the lineup if you don't use ETN. It would be Burrow, McCaffrey, Pollard with Chase, Brian Thomas, Higgins, Brenton Strange, Harold Fannin as the punt away at flex, and then the Titans D. How do you feel about not only the double tight end, Erik, but the double cheap tight end to unlock the rest of your lineup? If this is, and it probably only has to happen with one of these super expensive game stacks.
Totally. And if you're going up at quarterback, which Burrow is going up at quarterback, it's also a way to get away. Everyone's going to do Mac Jones plus expensive guys, and we can do the opposite by going down with the double cheap tight end.
So that's how that lineup looks with Brian Thomas. If we were to do it with ETN in the place of Brian Thomas as that second spot for the to take out Brian Thomas, switch in another Jag into the running back spot, that gives us $5,000 each at wide receiver and flex, and then we can get to my main man Chuba Hubbard. I think it's like Chuba Hubbard and Tillman. I think is what it ends up being. Let's see if that ends up working. Actually, it might not even work. It might be too much money. Is there anyone that mid $5,000 range? Any of you guys like at wide receiver?
I think we got to keep an eye on the Chiefs. Because I think either Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy is going to look good in this range.
I think if I was going to make a move, honestly, on the Chiefs, and maybe this is just me galaxy braining the entire scenario, Erik, I think I'd take the shot on Tyquan Thornton because I think they're just going to use him as the deep option.
He was definitely the deep option last week, led them in air yards, I believe, despite Hollywood Brown getting 17 million targets. I don't think that that's crazy. I think that game could be a little bit of a sneaky shootout. And if Worthy is not, I mean, he's going to play regardless, but if Worthy is not 100%, he's definitely the deep shot guy.
Yeah, you could go Tillman and Javonte Williams, Xavier Worthy, or DeAndre Swift if you wanted to. But if you just did throw Thornton in, I just want to see what that looks like if you open it up with Tyquan at receiver. That gives you $6,400 left. That can get you into a flex with John. That gets you back up to Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, Cortland Sutton, Tyreek, James Cook. Like there are guys that all of a sudden we don't feel like super bad about playing them.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a good price range. Like I said, I like Breece Hall this week. I think Kyron Williams is probably going to go overlooked. We could even put one of those guys up, in the running back spot for either McCaffrey or EDN, and then try to find a wide receiver. We like it, at the $5,700 or $7,500 price levels. But I think this lineup looks good as it is with Breece Hall in there.
Yeah, so if we kind of go back and forth between them, we had this one where we've built it with ETN, Erik, who I know that you like, but versus the other one that we just built that had Brian Thomas in it. Which one do you think that you prefer?
I think I would still prefer the Brian Thomas side, even though I'm an ETN guy this week. I think it all just kind of came together a little bit better, and structurally is really nice from a tournament perspective, being a different structure than everyone else is going to build.
All right, well, when we return, we're going to keep building some of these shell lineups. John had mentioned that we're going to do Baltimore and Cleveland, and that is where we will start right after this. Here's a stat that stops people in their tracks. Nearly half of American adults say they would suffer financial hardship within 6 months if they lost their primary income earner. If that stat hits close to home, you're not alone, and you're not out of options. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. It's an easy way to protect the people you love and feel good about the future. Policy Genius makes it easy on you by helping you compare your options by getting quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. And you can talk to a team of licensed agents who can walk you through the entire process step by step. So, secure your family's future with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/Mayo to compare free life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you can save. That's policygenius.com/Mayo. Now that I'm old, I've had to come to the fact that I just don't bounce back the way that I used to. I don't wake up in the morning feeling normal. And now that football season has started, that is absolutely unacceptable. I got work to do in the morning, and I got kids that are waking up. It's no good. But that isn't a problem anymore because I found ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. The ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, invented by PhD scientists to tackle the rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for the rough days after drinking. pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol the first drink of your night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel the best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/PatMayo to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Pat Mayo at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/PatMayo and use the code PatMayo at checkout for 15% off. I appreciate the comment section telling me, Erik, that I'm not actually old. Although, once you get over 40, you start feeling old.
I feel old at 37. I hope that makes you feel even older.
Well, yeah, John, I'm guessing you're the young one of the group then?
I'm almost 50 years old.
See, you're looking better than all of us right now. You certainly do not look like you're almost 50. But let's go to Baltimore and Cleveland. That's where you wanted to go for. Maybe we'll call it an early 50th birthday present, going with Lamar Jackson. How do we build with Lamar this week?
Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily need to pile on a bunch of stacking partners and run backs, but it actually, if you think about the week 1 game, he really kind of opened that game up. So it's not a terrible idea either. Like, even though it doesn't seem necessary, that can really accelerate your score, especially if you're in these large field tournaments. Like, the first thing I like to do if I'm putting in Lamar Jackson is I want to put in Zay Flowers. He really seems like he's zeroed in on Flowers as his primary receiver. I think Flowers is just a talented receiver as it is. I think he'd be talented anywhere, but with Lamar Jackson, I think it's the perfect pairing. So I would just start with Jackson and Flowers, and then probably pick 1 or 2 Browns run backs. I know you really like Cedric Tillman. I think Fannin makes sense if we want to drop down to 3,100, but I'd maybe start with Tillman first, and then see if we need to go down and use a punt play like Fannin.
Well, do we have an idea yet, Erik, of whether or not... I don't think that Judkins is going to play in this game, right?
I don't think so.
Would this be a spot to utilize Sampson at running back, knowing that he's most likely going to be the premier pass-catching back in this game? Because I think everyone's going to want to go to Fannin based off last week, but just the amount of targets that we ended up with from Sampson last week, I think he might be a viable play here.
I think he's a great example of where we saw something that was shocking in week 1 and we're kind of writing it off in week 2. And I think it's not a great matchup, but I think he makes for a pretty appealing, super contrarian running back, bring back in that range that we've been kind of looking for guys. And there really isn't much. And in this particular game stack, I do think he can make some sense.
So we could try that. What if we just used Sampson at running back as a part of this game stack, John, got rid of Tillman, used Fannin at tight end, and then built a super team?
Yeah, I mean, we're saving a lot of money there, but it makes sense. Actually, I don't think Sampson's going to be very highly owned at all this week, but he should see some ownership, and this is the perfect spot to use him. Because 8 receptions last week. We're basically saying Baltimore is going to score a lot here. Cleveland's going to have to pass to catch up. I agree. I don't think the second round pick Judkins is going to see the field a lot, if at all, this week. So I think Dylan Sampson actually is a really good call here.
Yeah, Dylan Sampson right now by the 4-for-4 ownership projection. Still earlier on in the week at $5,200. We're looking at 1.7% ownership on a Friday for projected own. Even if that goes up, Erik, what are we looking at max? 3%?
At most, yes.
And I guess it all depends on what does that now allow us to do in this lineup. We have $5,700 per player. That includes a defense to fill out a running back, wide receiver in flex. Do we want to throw in the cheap defense? Would this be a lineup where maybe you would want to correlate it a little bit, maybe spend up? What is the next step here? McCaffrey?
McCaffrey always seems to be the logical next step in every single one of these teams. I don't mind the idea. You shouted out James Conner earlier, and we haven't really messed around in James Conner territory. And then we could go up to something like a Cardinals defense that would pair well with a James Conner. I think Carolina is not only bad on defense, I think they're very bad on offense as well. The Jaguars defense had no struggles with them at all. So I think something like this fits well on this team and is one of those running backs that we've talked about and we all like, and is sort of not falling through the cracks. He's not going to be low owned, but he's also not, Christian McCaffrey is the shiny toy that everybody wants to play.
Yeah, John, Connor's really in that zone between the expensive guys that you feel like you need to have, but he's not cheap enough to be like the value plays like we were. And Brees Hall, I do think, falls into that exact same scenario where they're just a bit too expensive versus the three guys that we put in our pool, ETN, Pollard, and Hubbard, where it just would be like, all right, I'll save 500 more bucks and just drop down to those guys instead. That I could see Connor and Hall both losing out on ownership because of that.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to see a lot of ownership go to McCaffrey, and so that's going to lead to a lot of other running backs, especially the ones that are at kind of odd price points, going pretty much overlooked.
In the chat, Felix says that he loves Gibbs this week. I mean, that's not in a game that we've done at all here. Would you feel bad about Jahmyr Gibbs? I mean, that seems like a crazy question to ask, but is the cost of Gibbs, when we take a look at his price point at $7,400, he's $100 less than McCaffrey. We know everyone is using McCaffrey. Is he a decent price point here to go to? Because if we throw him in, we still have $5,500 left. You could go cheap, expensive at receiver. You could use Roma Dunze on the other side if that's the way that you wanted to go. What do you guys make of Jahmyr Gibbs and potentially using him in this lineup? Or is this lineup different enough that maybe that's not the move? Just use McCaffrey and be on your way if you're going to spend this much money on another running back.
I think Gibbs is in a good spot, actually. If you think about it, I think the Lions offense is in a much better situation at home this week than San Francisco, putting in Mac Jones and going to New Orleans. But I agree, actually, like Jahmyr Gibbs is, everyone's just going to go to McCaffrey when they're at that price level, and especially when they're trying to fill the running back spots. But like Gibbs could easily outscore McCaffrey at a fraction of the ownership, and he's the same exact price level.
Where would you go with it, Erik?
Gibbs is probably my favorite tournament running back that we haven't really discussed. I think last night's game, ironically, made me feel more excited for Jahmyr Gibbs and the Detroit Lions overall. The Green Bay Packers defense, I think we can take that one. They go straight to the podium. They're a really, really good defense, shutting down Daniels after shutting down this Lions team. But I thought that the usage and the role for Jahmyr Gibbs, like if you drafted him in the first round, right, of your fantasy draft, was exactly what you were hoping for. He played 66% of snaps, 44 out of 67. And what I kind of thought about over the summer was we saw when David Montgomery went down at the end of last year, Jahmyr Gibbs just became, a god. He was unstoppable. He was putting up monster weeks every week. And you sort of thought without Ben Johnson, like, are they going to put that genie back in the bottle? Are we really going to go back to this like full 50-50 split? And they didn't in week one. Obviously, it didn't work out in the box score for Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think this spot is much different. And I think if that utilization continues, he's going to be a really awesome tournament pivot to Christian McCaffrey in the short term.
John, I know we have Zay Flowers in with Lamar Jackson right now. Is it necessary to have a pass catcher for Lamar Jackson?
It's not necessary, but it helps. I mean, if Zay Flowers has a big game, we know we're going to get some rushing production from Lamar Jackson. But what is going to elevate him to like the top of tournaments? And he's one of the most expensive quarterbacks this week. So if we're putting Lamar Jackson into our lineup, like he needs to put up a monster score, even for Lamar Jackson. Like he can do that on the ground. Like he can get 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns. But it's a much easier path to say like Zay Flowers just goes out there and gets another 100 yards receiving with a touchdown or 2, and that's going to elevate Lamar Jackson.
So if we throw Roma Dunze into this lineup at $4,800 to kind of counter with Gibb and have a little mini stack there, that leaves us with $6,300 for a receiver, with the best options being Cortland Sutton, T. Higgins, JSN, DK Metcalf, Marvin Harrison's there, but we already have an overload of this Cardinals team. The one thing that we could do here, John, is get rid of the Cardinals defense, although they're paired with Connor, drop down to one of those cheaper defenses that we like, and get up to the next wide receiver level of basically we could get up to Malik Neighbors if we really wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right answer. I think either works. I was thinking like, the T. Higgins works fine. We don't have any other like Cincinnati representation in this lineup. So people might be going to either Jamar Chase or Chase Brown. Not a lot of people are going to be playing T. Higgins as a one-off, and if he gets 2 touchdowns, from that game, and there's not a whole lot of other scoring, we are stacking another game here. So we're maybe making a little bit of a bet already that the Cincinnati-Jacksonville game is not the game environment that you need in this lineup. But yeah, we could also drop down from the Cardinals defense, try to get something a little bit cheaper. And then, that next tier of wide receivers is good as it gets with like CeeDee Lamb, weak neighbors.
So where would you want to go here, Eric? What do you think the proper move is? Just use T. Higgins in this spot and kind of try to pick that game as what John said. T. Higgins catches 2 touchdowns, and he's the main guy in that game that you need. And then you kind of lap everyone else who stacked up that game because everyone else didn't get there. You got there and have this other game.
Yep, I'm in on this range of wide receiver, and T. Higgins is near the top of it. I think Courtland Sutton is a fine play. I also think Jackson Smith and Jigba is an interesting tournament play this week, where the field is not loving that game, rightfully so, but his utilization was absolutely I don't think I've ever seen an individual player with a 60% target share and 90% of team air yards. So if nobody's going to buy into that, I think he's also in play.
Well, let's take a look at the projections and see what is going on in this range. So in terms of value, it is T. Higgins who is the highest. Then it's actually Marvin Harrison down at 5,800 per the projections in terms of GPP value once we weight everything. And the ceiling nod actually goes to T. Higgins as well, with Jackson Smith and Jigba being second. So that makes a ton of logical sense. Zay Flowers is right there too. In terms of overall construction, Eric, the way that we're going through this lineup, and we end up with 3 receivers, well, I guess 2 receivers in this like low $6,000 range. I'll throw in T. Higgins for right now. I very much doubt that people are going to land in this area multiple times. It would be one or the other, it feels like to me.
I totally agree, which is funny because this range is really good. I think like we'll look back in 6 or 8 weeks and this range of guys will laugh at the prices on some of these guys, but just the kind of texture of this slate, nobody's doing exactly what you just said.
Well, I do want to play a lineup that looks very identical to this. So we're going to do Pat's stupid lineup of the week, which I'm probably going to end up putting in a high dollar entry. Let's get rid of Lamar Jackson, put in the guy that I like, Joe Flacco. From the other side of the ball, we'll get rid of Dylon Sampson. We'll keep in Fannin, like whatever. Get rid of Roma Dunze. We'll throw in Cedric Tillman, save some money here. And that way we can bring Derrick Henry back and lose Zay Flowers in this spot. Now, all of a sudden, we can start building it up a little bit differently. Do you guys think that Flacco is just objectively a terrible play here? Because he might throw the ball 50 times.
I wouldn't say terrible. I wouldn't say terrible.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Not terrible.
Yes, not terrible. That's the politest way to put it, I guess.
But you got, like, John, are you going to be playing any Flacco lineups?
Oh, I'll absolutely be playing some Flacco lineups. We have to see what this Baltimore defense looks like. I mean, I know like being pieced up by Josh Allen is one thing, but I don't know. Joe Flacco's return to Baltimore, I can get into it.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is where we can go, and then we can throw Marvin Harrison back in there. What does this lineup look like? And it gives us $5,900 for Pollard. Man, I keep laying on fucking Pollard. Oh. He better be good, or I'm suing you, John.
He pairs so well with the Titans defense, and we're always landing at that $5,900 price range.
So this lineup would turn into Flacco with Tillman and Fannin, Derrick Henry on the bring back, Christian McCaffrey with Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard in the Titans D, and then you just have Marvin Harris. You can turn Marvin Harrison, CeeDee Lamb combo into any 2v2 combo that you wanted. That might even work as, maybe we could probably make that even better. If you're not worried about bringbacks or anything like that, you could do Neighbors, hello Neighbors, and Garrett Wilson, good God. Do we like Garrett Wilson against the Bills, or do we like Brees Hall better here? Because I really do not want to play. Tyreek feels like the most obvious play in the world. I just can't do it to myself again.
I'm okay with Garrett Wilson. I prefer Brees, though.
All right. So if we go to Brees, I wonder what that does for us. We can go to the flex and go to Hall. And then it leaves us $6,200 at receiver, which would be Zay Flowers as, complete shootout in Cleveland and Baltimore. We got Flowers and Derrick Henry. Hope that Lamar doesn't. I don't like that idea at all. That's a stupid idea. We can go to, actually, we can just use T. Higgins again in this lineup since we still don't have any Bengals. The Lamar version, John, probably the better version, but no one's going to be playing this one. If you want to compete with me for dead last, you can play this lineup.
This doesn't look bad at all to my eyes. I actually think this is going to project surprisingly well.
I mean, it'd be hard to build a lineup this week based on some of the values that we have that would project really poorly, I think.
Yeah, it's true. I think anything with Christian McCaffrey is going to project pretty well. But yeah, we should keep in mind that it just takes Jahmyr Gibbs outscoring McCaffrey. Like Gibbs getting a few more receptions is totally conceivable, and it's going to be a much less projectable lineup, but it's just as feasible.
Well, let's talk about the strategy of that then, because I know we've kind of danced around this, Erik, with McCaffrey's going to project the best. McCaffrey is quote unquote the safest play, although it's still a guy who plays on a team that might be injury cursed, and he is already going in with a calf injury, which I don't think magically disappeared over the course of the last 7 days. Not that it affected him at all last week, although he wasn't super efficient with a lot of his touches. But if you were to play, let's say, in a big single entry here, and your last spot came down to that McCaffrey spot, would it make sense to you to just roll the dice on Gibbs at 1/4 the ownership and just hope he outscores him?
100%. It's one of my probably favorite tournament plays of this week is, of course, doing some of the stuff we did that's just getting away from him structurally, but getting into the Jahmyr Gibbs, or you mentioned Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, getting into those other superstars. I think CMC is, certainly not going to score 6 fantasy points or something, but I think it's a little bit more, sketchy than maybe the field is thinking with the Mac Jones stuff, with all the injuries that they've had, with the injuries that Christian McCaffrey has dealt with. And he got a lot of touches, but Brian Robinson played a good amount in that game. It wasn't like old school 100% of snaps Christian McCaffrey. If the Saints are really bad, right? Like this could go south in various different ways. They were losing that game, and that's what led to all the targets. What if they're not? Right? What if Brian Robinson scores a goal line rushing touchdown? There's more ways that CMC can fail, I think, this week than the ownership is necessarily going to dictate.
Would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, actually, I hadn't really thought of it exactly that way, but I think that's an excellent point. That we're thinking, what if San Francisco just completely fails without Mac Jones? Well, what if they actually succeed and the Saints just can't keep up? Like the 49ers don't necessarily want to run Christian McCaffrey out there to eat up the clock at this point. Like there's a reason they went out and got Brian Robinson. So Brian Robinson could be the guy that's just, not necessarily putting up a big fantasy score, but he's taking enough away from McCaffrey that McCaffrey doesn't get there.
There's one more game that I really do want to focus on, and I guess I was going to check in with the chat. You're winning the chat, Erik. ETN, 49%, Pollard, 23%, Hubbard, 28% of who is going to score the most fantasy points. And again, we're live every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so you can always come in, participate in the chat. If you want to get in, you need to be subbed to Mayo Media Network. And if you're here, if you're watching, I see people watching, smash a like. Thanks. Help us out here. And I'll have my cheat sheet available, sent to you via email this weekend through the Mayo Media newsletter. Sub to that down in the description right now. I want to do Jets, Bills, John. Do you want to do Allen or Fields, or should we build one out and then try the other side first?
So I would actually go with Josh Allen. I know Justin Fields look really, really good. I think there's something that's going to be a little bit overlooked with this quarterback pricing on DraftKings, that all of these guys got cheaper. Like Josh Allen just put up 40-something DraftKings points. He's $100 cheaper, this week. So I'd start this with Josh Allen.
So I have Josh Allen in right now, Erik. I got him with Shakir, and then I have Brees Hall as the bring back. Does that make the most sense to you? Because I think with Josh Allen, I don't know how many of his pass catchers I want, because I also want him scoring the touchdowns too.
Totally. And I think this is a rough spot for Keon Coleman. Dalton Kincaid scored a touchdown, but his role still isn't what we were hoping for. I don't think playing him with James Cook is the worst, but I think most of the pass catching from James Cook was kind of game script driven. I think Shakir is my favorite stacking partner. And like I mentioned, Brees is definitely my favorite Jet.
So, John, would there be another Jet you would throw in here? Like, would you actually put Garrett Wilson in here too and just hope it's all Allen, Shakir, or just Allen by himself on one side, but you do have to keep up the other way? Or is this enough for this game, do you think?
I think you could put Garrett Wilson in here. Actually, what we like about the Jets offense is that it's concentrated, and it's concentrated, behind Justin Fields, Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, like Erik mentioned at the top of the show, just made up a disproportionate amount of the Jets offense. So I think you could actually put in Garrett Wilson. What you're hoping here is just a shootout, right? Like if that's what you want anytime you're stacking a game. And both Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson are capable of those long touchdowns that turns the ball back over to Josh Allen.
So we'll go with, screw it. We'll throw in Titans D again, save ourselves some money. Tight end, we haven't got to McBride, who is $1,000 more expensive on this slate, Erik, than the next highest price guy, who's Kelsey. Is there value in going to him knowing he's by far the best on this slate, or do we continue doing what we're doing and just say, you know what, screw it, let's just use the cheap guys? I mean, we haven't talked about Tyler Warren yet, who even against Denver might be a really nice option here.
I think Trey McBride has a little bit of what John has talked about with the elite quarterbacks in that he's way too cheap, but there's a lot of other guys that are also too cheap at cheaper prices, including in this game. Juwan Johnson also looks pretty good on the opposite. Juwan Johnson in the 49ers game. There's a bunch of different tight end options available. Trey McBride is the one tight end, in my opinion, that can just gap the field and do the Josh Allen game, right? 35, 40 fantasy points. These other guys are good point per dollar options, and I like a lot of them, but they're not that level of upside. I think that this is a little bit trickier spot for Marvin Harrison than week one was. And they don't have anybody else. If James Conner doesn't score the touchdowns and Marv doesn't score the touchdowns, it's going to be Trey McBride. I know he never scores touchdowns, but eventually, maybe they try to get him a touchdown once in a while. And I think that this spot is really good for him. And the ownership's going to be like at least not low, but held in check because of all the other cheaper tight end guys.
Right now, we'll get another update on the projections coming out later on this afternoon, John, over at 4for4. 4for4.com/Mayo. Get yourself 25% off all of the tools. And I'm just looking at the optimizer now, looking at the GPP values of these players of active tight ends this week. It's McBride by a ton. Then it's Kelsey, Fannin. Goddard's probably not going to play, so he's going to be out. Brenton Strange and Juwan Johnson. That's it for the entire slate.
Yeah, that's what we've been looking to stack our quarterback with our tight end or a tight end from the same game in a lot of these lineups. And there's a reason why is there's just not a lot of differentiation. But the guy that does differentiate himself is Trey McBride, and he's too cheap. And I said it in week one, but he had 49 more receptions than the next closest Cardinal last season. He's the rare tight end that is like a focal point of his team's offense.
So let's see how we can fill out the rest of this lineup. We put in McBride. Let's put Hubbard on the other side of him. And now we have $5,100 left for a flex and a wide receiver. Erik, how do you think you would want to divvy this up? Would you want to go like balanced here, or would you try to find, you mentioned Juwan Johnson, for example. Could you go double tight end with crappy Juwan Johnson, Juwan man, at $3,600, and then you open yourself back up to like Brian Thomas if you wanted to throw him at wide receiver?
I'm totally comfortable with that. Another guy that I mentioned I like a lot that we haven't plugged in anywhere was if we're not going to play Christian McCaffrey and the premise of the 49ers do still perform well, but maybe they don't need him, would be Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver and see what that could leave us.
Erik, on this show, we call him Ricky Bullets.
Him and Brian Robinson, they're buddies, right? They got to have their lockers next to each other.
Of course. So that does give us another mini stack there as well, with Johnson and Ricky Bullets coming back the other side. Unfortunately now, John, we have $1,400 left that we could upgrade. Actually, if we don't care about having a mini stack with McBride and Hubbard, Hubbard turns into Jahmyr Gibbs 1v1 with the amount of money we have left.
Yeah, I think that's a really good option. I think we could upgrade Juwan Johnson if we don't care about the stacking with Ricky Pearsall. I think Pearsall is a perfectly fine play as a one-off. But yeah, and then that gives us 5,000. That's not the best price range.
It's not, but are there guys slightly below this that you don't mind? Like, Roma Dunze is 48. I like Roma Dunze. Calvin Austin, who I think is, I don't want to say sneaky, but at $4,700, not a bad price. Or you could just upgrade him to Cedric Tillman, who I do really like. And then, we've used Titans defense in every single one of these lineups. We could just upgrade that and try to find something we like there, so you can get up to Steelers D if you wanted to against no offensive line Sam Darnold, or just use the Rams against Cam Ward, who completed -4 passes last week.
Yeah, I actually think upgrading the defense is a good call. We have used the Titans defense a lot in this. When I'm rolling out 150 lineups, I would never just focus in on one defense like that. So yeah, whenever you find yourself what do I do with all this money? I think looking to upgrade your defense is not the worst.
Because we're trying to tell a story here, Erik, with this lineup. Would you rather go Rams, Steelers, Eagles defense? Which one of those three?
I think Rams. I think that the Titans being a potential disaster is in the cards, right? I think it was mostly the Broncos, but the Rams have a pretty good, I think you said at the top, Pat, the Rams have a pretty good defense. My concern for that game is not the Rams defense. It's probably the Rams offense. And so if the Rams defense is playing well, Cam Ward could definitely make some mistakes. He's kind of a gunslinger.
Rams D currently projected to be the highest owns. I found the most volatility in ownership projections day to day before you get to Sunday in the defenses, because something will get steamed as we go through. Like, I would guess that the Titans are going to be more owned than whatever the hell they're projecting for right now, like 1%. And that will be reflected in the projections as we get closer to actual kickoff on Sunday. But Rams, Ravens, Cowboys, Steelers are your top 4. Would you guys have any issues just watching that? I know it was in Brazil, it was on Friday night, and it's Mahomes. But with Jalen Carter back, the Eagles can actually get through that offensive line. Like, we've seen the Eagles absolutely dominate this offensive line and cause a lot of problems for Mahomes. Like, Eagles D, I don't think is going to be very highly owned whatsoever.
I like it.
John.
Xavier Worthy, potentially, not fully healthy. The offensive line for the Chiefs looked pretty disastrous. Jawan Taylor, he's lining up on side now, but he false starts on every single play. It's kind of a mess, right? We're talking about Tyquan Thornton, like as a key part of this offense. Travis Kelce looks totally cooked. I don't see why the Eagles can't get to him. I mean, he'll do some Mahomes things, but that doesn't mean that the Eagles can't get to him several times.
Let's flip this build and go with the Field side instead of the Allen side. What changes for you, John, as we start to do that? Because we open up a lot more money. We save ourselves almost $1,500 off the hop. Would you play Breece Hall with Fields knowing that he needs to get going in the receiving game? Or is this the same sort of idea as we just had with Josh Allen, where it's Fields and one pass catcher because we need Fields to score himself?
Yeah, I would put Garrett Wilson in over Breece Hall. Just Hall, he had 2 receptions last week. That's not a ton. I don't think Justin Fields is necessarily a guy that's like dumping it off all that often to the running back. Like, usually in the situation where he would dump it off, I think he's looking to run instead, which is what we want. So we want like Justin Fields, I think, paired with Garrett Wilson. And I'd maybe like skip Breece Hall in this lineup. I probably prefer Breece Hall in the Josh Allen lineup.
Would you go Shakir or James Cook, you think, as the bill you'd want to go with?
I don't like James Cook. I never liked playing James Cook. I think he's a perfectly fine NFL running back. He just has those limited opportunities. So I would definitely go with Shakir.
Yeah, would you go Shakir over Cook, Erik, for that price point?
It's very tough. I think Shakir is a lot more fun in the Allen stacks, because if Allen's going to go nuts throwing, like the Fields side of things, like Fields plus Garrett Wilson could actually kind of grind this game to a halt a little bit, right? And Fields is running and the Jets are having success. If it's kind of one of those weird, tricky things where if Shakir is going to be optimal, have his like 2 times a year really big game, that seems like an Allen team to me, right? If Shakir's having a bunch of receiving yardage, whereas on this side, like maybe it is a James Cook where he's does his 3 touchdown thing again. He steals the touchdowns away from Josh Allen.
All right, well, let's work under that premise just to mix it up a little bit. We haven't used James Cook in any of these lineups. I like John. I'm not a big James Cook guy for daily fantasy. Anyway, he's a fun, like, season-long fantasy guy because he has that floor that's kind of baked in every week because of the touches, but rarely goes absolutely crazy enough to carry you. And we'll see how this works. We can always take him out as we go along, and then you start getting back into the same sort of level. But I'm just trying to think about the shells that we can build for these games. So Field, Wilson, Cook would be that one. I want to rapid fire through some of the other ones that we went through as well. Do you guys have, if you had to rate it out of 10, John, Indy and Denver as a game stack that you like, where would you fall on that list?
It's probably somewhat down there. The Denver defense is just really good. The Denver defense is so good. I think it's going to eat into Bo Nix's production. But I think I would prefer Bo Nix over Daniel Jones.
So you'd want the Bo Nix side. How about you, Erik? Where does that game fall for you, and which side would you like?
Very low. I agree 100% with John. I think that Bo Nix could run hot on touchdowns this week, but I find it pretty difficult to see the game environment being awesome there. But I would prefer the Knicks side and hope, I think they can score points here. So if he soaks up all the touchdowns, throws for 4 or something like that, you can double stack him. You can I would probably play a Tyler Warren as a bring back in that game, but I do prefer the Knicks side.
So, John, to look at it, it would be Knicks, Sutton, because I'm still not even sure if Evan Ingram's going to play in this game or not. He has a calf bruise, better than a calf strain, but that's where we're looking. It's an interesting shell because you go Knicks, Sutton, and then Tyler Warren. two like medium options and then a cheaper option, more expensive for the tight end position, but relative to your entire salary cap, you get left with $5,500. You can still build one of those super teams that we've been kind of jamming in around this type of core.
Yeah, I think if there's a place I'm going to use Jonathan Taylor, it might be in a lineup like this. I don't love playing running backs against Denver, but like Jonathan Taylor could break one loose, at home in the dome. So yeah, I think he's viable too in a lineup like this over Warren.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, you could do that. Then you would have to skimp probably at tight end. Then you're back into that Fannin range again. Erik, for you, Detroit and Chicago. This game is in Detroit. It's inside. Perfect weather in a rebounds. But both teams are looking to rebound offensively. Where would you rate this game out of 10 and how much you like it?
This is up there a little bit for me out of 10. Call it a 7.5. Something. It's not my favorite game, but I'm really intrigued specifically by the Lions side of things.
So you like the Goff side of this?
Yes, pretty much everything from the Lions' perspective. Jahmyr Gibbs is my favorite, so that's clouding it a little bit. But I think that this could be an awesome bounce back spot for the wide receivers as well. The Bears secondary was banged up, and I know that they kind of held up for most of the game against JJ McCarthy and the Vikings, but I think that this is a different beast. I think, like I said, last night's game, I feel a lot better about the Lions. Like, look, they ran into a buzzsaw, and maybe the Packers are that good, but back at home, off of a loss against their old buddy Ben Johnson, right? Let's go run it up and drop 50, and I think that they could do that against this Bears team.
So, John, how would you do this? Would it be Goff, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, Goff, Amon-Ra, and Laporta? Like, how would you want to do the Lion side of it?
Yeah, actually, I like the idea of pairing Goff with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think it's a pairing that people aren't going to use that often. I agree. I think one of the teams that really stood out to me last night watching Thursday Night Football was Detroit, because we knew going into Green Bay that their Detroit offense can be superb. We knew that week one was maybe not the week for them. But then when they put up that expected performance in week one against a very difficult defense in Lambeau Field, they're suddenly out of our mind completely. But yeah, Goff and Gibbs, then you compare Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta. And then I think there's plenty. I think DJ Moore is a good run back from the Bears side.
Do you like DJ more than you like Rome Odunze? I always mention that because Odunze is $4,800 and Moore is $56. Feel like that's going to be the difference between taking Amon-Ra or having to drop down to Jameson Williams in this lineup.
I do like DJ Moore over Rome Odunze. Okay. I think it's worth the $800, but I do like either of them, right? Like if we get into a spot where we need the $800 to get another receiver we really like or a flex we really like, I don't mind the idea of dropping down from DJ Moore to Odunze, but I would start with DJ Moore first and then see if I need the salary.
So Goff, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, DJ Moore, Erik. Let's throw in Titans D. Why not, right? And that leaves us $5,400. It feels like we need to. Who is the punt play we want to do here? Do we want to punt off tight end? Do we want to punt off one of these wide receiver spots? Because we're going to need a little bit of cash to get back up to depending on what we want to do at running back. I mean, we could throw Pollard in here. We could throw Hubbard in here. There's a few different options, but I think this would work out to be Hubbard, McBride, Tillman, and then a flex, which would be like somewhere right around that mid-range. How would you want to play this?
I would go down at the tight end position on this team. I would get, whatever our flavor is here. I kind of think you could build like a little secondary game stack. John talked about using the tight end, pairing him with your quarterback, but you could take, we're obviously not doing that here on this team. You could do something. Yeah. Juwan McCaffrey or, Fannin and Derrick Henry or, something like that makes a lot of sense.
We could do McCaffrey with Juwan Johnson. Then that gives us money for Chuba Hubbard and Tillman if we want to. John, does that look good to you, or do you want to use Pollard again?
We've got the Titans defense.
So I can change the Titans defense, okay?
All right.
We can change Titans defense to Panthers defense, if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And now it gives us $300. We could get up, I suppose, $300 off Tillman at receiver if we wanted to. And that would get us, Downs, Bateman, Shaheed, Kayshon Boutte, Wandale. I don't like any of these guys better than Tillman. Do you?
We're only a little bit away from Rome Odunze in this lineup, actually.
So how do we do that then? We take out Tillman, we put in Odunze. That would drop us from, actually, I like this bet, although I like Hubbard better. I do like the ETN call from Erik, and then that gets us back to Titans D, although it doesn't quite match up. It's exactly enough money to make what we just did work. Would that be a better option, do you think?
I think so.
I like this.
All right. So other games, we got Miami and New England. I feel like we built that one out already. Carolina, Arizona. Is that game stackable to you, even from the Arizona side, or is that just to pick your favorite piece of it, maybe skinny stack it and move on, Erik?
It's not. I will not have any stacks of that game. I mentioned I don't think the Panthers offense is particularly good. So if they're going to do something like a Chuba or a McMillan one-off, I also think the Cardinals. What I've said all this week, but leading into this year, is the Cardinals look like they're playing offense like a basketball team trying to not play without shooting 3-pointers. They're like, they have good players, but they can't shoot. Right? They have no juice. I don't know how they ever create a big play. Marvin Harrison is sort of capable of downfield play, but James Conner is slow, and Trey McBride is their best weapon, and Michael Wilson is not very good. So from a game stack perspective, it's the Cardinals can get home, but are we gonna get this crazy scoring environment? I don't tend to think so.
John, I think it's Connor, Tet, Connor, Hubbard, McBride, Tet, McBride, Hubbard. That's the only one of those two together. That's the only way I probably want to touch this game.
Yeah, the offenses are pretty concentrated. So I don't know you necessarily need to have this as a massive stack with your quarterback. I agree. Having a little mini stack here works for if you want to stack this game.
Rams, Titans. Do we like the Rams? We've been jamming in Titans defense, but what if we're wrong, John? What if it's all Rams offense?
Maybe in a 150 set. It's really not. I think for limited entries, it's probably not a game I would stack. I think some of the individual pieces, like a Tony Pollard, is fine. But it's not a game I'm going to go out of my way to stack.
Yeah, you go Pollard Puka would probably be the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, I do like Puka. I think Puka's a guy that can rack up receptions and doesn't necessarily need a standout, high scoring game environment to have a really good wide receiver score.
Well, I'll stick with you here, John. Do you like Seattle Pittsburgh at all?
That might be my least favorite game environment, to be honest. I mean, it's got one of the lower totals, which doesn't mean everything as we talked about already. But that's probably not a game I'm going to be trying to stack a lot. What
do you make of it, Erik? Yes or no on that game?
Nope.
How about just outside of the pieces that we've talked about? From San Francisco and New Orleans. People will stack up Mac Jones, but I think we've figured out throughout the course of the show that you really don't have to unless you really want to do it. And I can't imagine. Well, how much do you think optimizers will play a role in this? Because that they're going to spit out Mac Jones.
I think it plays a pretty big role. I think he's probably going to be the most overowned player of the slate, and then him paired with you talked about team stack ownership right earlier. I think from a team stack perspective, the 49ers are going to, I don't think that McCaffrey is necessarily totally overowned or Pearsall's overowned in a vacuum, but I think collectively they're going to be.
Yeah, what do you make of it, John? Do you think that people end up getting to Mac Jones because a optimizer tells them to?
I think so. I also think, I think people even just, building by hand, love the idea, this sneaky idea of there's a backup quarterback. He's only 4,000. I don't think there's been a time on DraftKings when we've needed the salary less, especially at the quarterback position. Mac Jones is 4,000, but Joe Burrow is only 6,600. You can find that $2,600 somewhere.
All right. Well, that's every single game. You can hit the time codes after the live show ends. If there's a game that you want to jump around, I'll have my cheat sheet and update with injuries, ownership, everything coming out on Saturday, plus a newsletter blast that's completely free to subscribe to. That's down in the description right now. John, what do you got going on at 4for4.com, both later on today and this weekend?
Yeah, we have the DFS MVP podcast coming out at that'll be recording live at going live at 12:30. I'm gonna have my rankings article out today, then followed by my main slate article out tonight, and then Discord show / chat at 10:30 on Sunday.
Yeah, and 4for4.com/Mayo to get yourself 25% off all the premium content up there and access to the Discord as well. Erik, what do you got going on the rest of the week? Where can we find you and where can we get the goods?
Yeah. First, appreciate you having me. Appreciate the patience on a little laggy going on here. But spikeweek.com is my site. We focus a lot on best ball over the summer, so you see a lot of underdog fantasy in your face. We talk a lot of underdog fantasy, but I'm also covering every single week, every single slate from a DFS perspective and sports betting perspective, and those battle royale drafts at Underdog. So you can get everything over at Spike Week from the summer bleeding on into the season. We do all sports. So NBA is coming, right? We did college football. We're covering everything for your best ball drafts, for DFS, for basically anything underdog fantasy related. And I am live Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays at this exact same time, actually, 10 a.m. Eastern. So you can check that out on the Spike Week YouTube channel.
Well, that's perfect because I'm live at 10 a.m. Eastern time on Monday and Friday. So you can just make the entire week just watching the live streams on YouTube. And that's the way that you want to go. Code Mayo at Underdog right now, by the way, to get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. And if you play a $5 Pick'em entry, win or lose, you'll get $50 in bonus funds directly into your account. Plus, Code Mayo unlocks a free pick for you to use in said Pick'em lineup. So maybe you can win some cash doing that. All right. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.